everyone, and welcome to episode 22 of What to Think, the technology news podcast from VentureBeat.com. I'm Dylan Tweeney.
And I'm Jordan Ovett.
Today we're going to be talking to Lou Cerny, who is the founder and CEO of New Relic, in whose office we are actually recording this very podcast.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. I'm definitely going to grill him with some tough questions about the shift from APM to data analytics.
But before we get to that, we're going to have some tech news highlights from VentureBeat.com. Here are 3 interesting stories from the last week that you need to know about, and we're going to tell you what to think. Let's start with the iOS 8 launch. Now, the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus started shipping, and lucky people who pre-ordered got them, or they waited in line and got them. But if you don't have an iPhone 6, you can still get iOS 8 by upgrading your phone, assuming it's not too old.
And then it takes a ton of space. That's what I've heard. I think 5.4 gigs.
I think it's 4.6 gigabytes of free space is needed. So if you want to download it over the air, you might, I haven't tested this, but you might be able to get away with less free space if you plug your phone in via USB cable and then sync with iTunes. It might require less, but it's pretty hefty. And it's not recommended for the oldest of compatible phones, which would be like the lame iPhone 4S that I use.
Yeah, mine too.
If you upgrade that thing, Jordan, you're going to be sorry. So this is the first thing I'm going to tell readers what to think is don't upgrade your iPhone 4S. However, for more recent phones, it's got some interesting new features. It's got, much better notification center, keyboard, the ability to swap out keyboards and use something like SwiftKey if you want.
Smarter Siri from what I've seen.
Siri, yeah. Okay, I'll believe that when I see it. But
she works faster. That's what I'm told.
Yeah, Devendra Hardawar, who reviewed it for us on our staff, is he did say Siri was smarter. And he likes or is intrigued by the integration of iOS 8 and OS
X.
10, right? Which lets you, like, if you're starting an email message on your phone.
Or a text message.
You can then continue it on your computer, and you can receive text messages on your computer. But he says, this is sort of a glimpse of the future, but so far the future is not working quite that well. It's called continuity, this feature. It does require that you have all Apple stuff. So those of you who were hoping that you could make your Android phone work with your OS 10 laptop, like me, you're not going to be able to take advantage of these fancy continuity features.
But I have a MacBook and I have an iPhone. I just have to upgrade my iPhone.
There you go. And it's also huge for developers. So it's got a lot of stuff on the inside, like the ability to swap out keyboards, as well as some tools for integrating health data, HealthKit, home automation stuff, and cloud storage stuff. There's a lot in there. And for most people, it's probably well worth downloading iOS 8.
So I just want to say I'm not in agreement that the time has come for Apple to catch up with Google in terms of mobile development. Devendra ends his post basically saying Apple is finally caught up with key Android features, and Android's main selling points are not as compelling, but...
Well, this is what all the Android people love to say. They're like, swipe to dismiss an email, swipe to archive an email message, right? Like Android has had that for 2 years or something, right? Yeah, so it's, it has some level of parity, I think.
I think Google uses data in more interesting ways. Google Now is something that I want to see Apple try to step up its game with. And voice recognition, from what I've heard, is much better also still on Android. So we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay. Let's move on to the next story. The big tech business story of the week, the past week, was the IPO of Alibaba, which is sort of a Chinese combination of Amazon and eBay and Facebook. I don't know about Facebook.
And anyway, Amazon Cloud.
Yeah. It's huge. So it had an IPO, one of the largest IPOs in history, netting at $8.3 billion.
Wow.
Stock debuted at $68 per share and immediately popped up to 93 and change. It's now around 94. So it's doing very well. Worth well over $200 billion, making it larger than Facebook, IBM, Verizon, Samsung, Oracle, or the US version of Amazon, also known as Amazon.
So I was really impressed with those numbers, but you had some kind of analysis that made it look like not as good for an investor, Yahoo. So I want to learn more about it from you.
Okay, so Yahoo owns a bunch of Alibaba stock, and they sold a bunch of it in the IPO as part of the terms of the IPO. So Yahoo got about $7 billion in cash out of that IPO, and they still hold some Alibaba stock. You would think the cash would be a good thing, and Marissa Mayer, the CEO of Yahoo, is probably going to use it to acquire some companies.
Of course.
She's also promised to return some of that cash to investors, probably in the form of a dividend.
Yep.
The tricky thing for Marissa Mayer is that if you subtract the cash that Yahoo has, which presumably is already factored into the market capitalization of Yahoo. So subtract that. Subtract its shares of Alibaba. Subtract its shares of Yahoo Japan, which is a separate company.
Okay.
When you take that all out, what you have left is worth less than zero, according to the stock market.
Okay.
So that's not good for the CEO of Yahoo, because basically the stock market is saying the only thing we care about in your company is the shares that you hold in these other companies and your cash. And that business of yours that makes you one of the top 3 websites in the world with billions of visitors a month and $4.5 billion in revenue a year from advertising, it's worth less than nothing to us.
It's like crazy.
It is crazy.
How could it be?
Well, that's the stock market for you. Here's what this means is Mayer is going to have to work very hard to fend off acquisitions from companies or leverage buyout firms or hedge funds that want to buy Yahoo, sell off its parts, and turn an instant profit.
Wow. Today I learned that Yahoo is in a trouble zone.
So there you go. I think her challenge is going to be using that cash to buy something really valuable that makes a huge difference as quickly as possible. And it's kind of too bad that she missed the opportunity to do that with Twitch, letting that go to Amazon.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Oculus VR. This is the company that makes a virtual reality headset. You look like a complete dork wearing it. But GamesBeat freelance journalist and resident dork Giancarlo Valdez tested out the newest version of the Oculus VR headset, which is nicknamed Crescent Bay. I don't know when Oculus turned into Intel, giving their things like weird code names before they came out. But it's called Crescent Bay, and he said it was very impressive. Really, really good VR. This is a lighter, faster, higher resolution headset than before. And they stuck it on him, and he was standing in the middle of a room on a mat. He could turn his head and look around things and almost get stepped on by a Tyrannosaurus, and it sounded very cool.
So I'm trying to figure out, though, if this is something that everyone is going to get. Did he kind of have any analysis on that?
Well, Facebook certainly thinks so, right? They acquired Oculus. And so I don't think a company like Facebook would acquire something as dorky as a VR headset if they didn't think that at some point that would become very mainstream.
Okay. Fair enough. But I was just talking with Shu, our GameSpeed editor, and he was making the point that like there's these other devices, like a treadmill that you can walk on and other devices that you can wear for a virtual reality experience. And it's like, yes, Facebook is behind this, but it's not clear from developer adoption, and it's not clear yet from consumer adoption that this will be the winning device. Although we have to say, rightly, like there's these improved optics and 360-degree motion tracking in this Crescent Bay model, and it's lighter, which is great. You can swap out headphones. That's great, but I want more proof that this is going to be something I myself, as a non-gaming guy, want to have for all different kinds of experiences.
Here's what I think. The future of Oculus VR will be absolutely in games. But I think when people start using it as an interface tool for productivity, you imagine you didn't have a monitor anymore, but you had like 20 virtual monitors all around you, and you could just spin your chair around and point to whichever one you wanted and make it large and type on it or draw on it, and then flip it away and turn and view another one. You can have a whole virtual reality Jordan Novette command center. And I think that's the future I'm excited about.
I'm just looking forward to writing my stories for VentureBeat through an Oculus Rift.
All right. Well, you let me know when you file your first Oculus Rift written story.
Don't give me a deadline on that.
Before we move to our guest, Lou Cerny, I want to give a quick thanks to our host and sponsor, Lou Cerny's company, New Relic. It is a software analytics company that makes sense of billions of metrics across millions of web and mobile apps. New Relic has an event coming up in a couple weeks. It's called Future Stack 14. It's happening October 8th and 9th at the Fort Mason Center in San Francisco. It's going to be a great conference with more than 1,000 technologists, developers, DevOps people, futurists, you name it. And you can get a discount if you go to newrelic.com or FutureStack.io and use the promo code VentureBeat. You will get 50% off beta tickets. And I have it on good authority that YouTube sensation OK Go will be performing on the opening night.
Cool.
At the Warfield in San Francisco. So
I should go.
Yeah, you should go. I think I'm going to be there.
Okay. Cool. See you there.
And speaking of New Relic, I'm very happy now to welcome our guest, the founder and CEO of the company, Lou Cerny. Welcome, Lou.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. It's just a short walk from your office, I imagine, to the studio here in New Relic, but thank you for taking the time. So this is your second enterprise technology company. Before this, you started Wiley Technology in 1998.
Yes.
And that was bought by CA in 2006 for $375 million. Also in the category of application performance management, which is, that's where New Relic started at least, right? So, So you've been around this block before. What made you want to take another trip?
Wiley, when I started it, kind of reminds me of where New Relic is in analytics today, in that when I started Wiley, there was nothing remotely like what Wiley did, which was the first company to put visibility into production software without requiring source code modifications. And that became a category called APM.
At that time, were you talking about sort of early web type applications, or was this still client server stuff?
It was actually, it was late 90s, and it was just the beginning of server-side Java really taking off. So that wave is what Wiley really rode.
Okay.
And so we created a market there, and now that's an established market with lots of vendors in it, including New Relic. And that was acquired in 06. But if you were to ask why I went back into solving this problem, I felt like there was unfinished business in the space, in that approaching this from a fresh point of view, where you've got the opportunity to really do it through a software as a service model, really focus on ease of use, and so that a product is just something that anyone can try out and fall in love with without any help from the vendor, then you can build a much more interesting company. And so New Relic is now at a point where we have an enormous number of customers using the product, and for such a small company, over 10,000 paying customers using New Relic. And so that's because we've made ease of use and simplicity at the forefront of everything we do. That allows us to reach companies of all sizes.
So your customers so far have been primarily developers, right? People who are building websites or building apps, or right?
Yeah, often the developer is the person that sponsors us in and is the champion of New Relic, because if you build software for a living, you have an interest in that software working in production. And often you're called at 2 a.m. to fix these problems because there's a bug in the code or something that only a developer can really diagnose. And New Relic is a developer's best friend for that reason. But obviously the application owner, like the business owner, has a vested interest in it working. The operations team. What our customers love about New Relic is that virtually everybody with a stake in the application has an interest in looking at what New Relic provides them, which is real-time data on how the software's doing.
So one thing that I've seen with New Relic is absolutely developers wear the shirt. Developers are the ones who talk about New Relic to other developers.
Sure.
Was it the same way at Wiley?
There was this tension at Wiley between whether or not we should focus on developers or just go straight to the IT ops team, because in early 2000, nobody thought you could build an interesting business by going straight for developers. We feel like developers now are the primary engine upon which businesses differentiate themselves. I mean, if you look at how virtually every company, what they're doing on digital with mobile and with their digital offerings, it's basically, can their developers build amazing products? That's what's driving the top line for businesses in every vertical, not just the software industry. And so we think that companies that can attract hundreds of thousands of developers to make them more productive and help them make more amazing software, those are the companies that are really going to have an impact. And New Relic wants to be one of those companies.
So I guess even if you haven't drunk the DevOps Kool-Aid, developers are probably a lot more tightly integrated with operations on the IT side than they were.
Well, yeah,
15 years ago.
Yeah, 15 years ago, there was kind of like, because developers weren't connected to their software in production, they'd build their software and maybe their tests would pass, and that's about all the validation they'd have as to whether what they did actually had a great impact on the customer. And New Relic gives the developer a window into, is this stuff that they've worked so hard on building, how is it working? And once you've got a connection to your software in production, you take more pride of ownership, and so you get developers actually taking a proactive stake in the software's success in production. And that's a culture change that our customers really value.
Now, let's talk about a shift that you've made in the last year, right? New Relic raised a whole bunch of money, $100 million round, right?
Yep.
I may be messing up the chronology here, but around the same time, you rolled out what had been codenamed Rubicon, and you're now calling Insight, right?
Yes.
Which is a product that's aimed not so much at developers, but more at line of business people, right?
Sure. So
how's that? Yeah. So what's behind that shift? I mean, is it?
Well, this is something I've been thinking on since, even before I sold Wiley. The question's been plaguing me. We've got this incredibly important vantage point of being inside our customer software with our code inside our customer's code and watching every transaction. And clearly what we're seeing ought to be able to be helpful to answer more questions than just, is the software fast? That's a super important question. But there are other really important questions that we can answer too if we had an incredibly powerful analytics solution that could answer questions like, how many people are on a pro trial on our site right now? Or what's the usage pattern of people who spend more versus spending less? And if we can get those answers in real time by watching every single transaction that goes through the system and being able to do the kinds of analytics that just weren't possible 5 or 10 years ago prior to cloud computing and the cost of infrastructure, then we've got something that can really move the needle for the business. And when you couple that with the fact that software is no longer just about automating back office functions, it's not just about tracking orders internally, it's the primary channel in which businesses are interacting with their customers. So if your online banking app is 5% better at doing what it does, that's going to have a meaningful impact on the bank's bottom line. Right.
And and the business guys are going to want to know that, right?
Right. So they want to see everything that customers are doing with their software because that's how the customer interacts with the business now, is through software.
So I get that marketers can see what's bringing people to the site. And I get that it can help people go after certain kinds of users or customers.
Sure.
But the thing that I've been struggling with or, thinking about since you guys debuted this last year at FutureStack is, can a company go into a vastly different market? I was talking with the CEO of Convey, actually, Stravish. They do mobile backend as a service. And he brought up this great point. How often is it that you get a company to succeed in two markets? Often what happens is companies buy their way into success through other markets.
Right.
And I just wanted to bounce it off of you. How do you feel about your confidence level? How do you feel about how things have gone so far that might give people a sense of where things are going?
This is a crowded market too. I mean, I don't want just not to pile on you, but I mean, you're entering a challenging market, right?
Well, first of all, we're defining a corner of it that we don't think anyone else does. By being inside the software, that's totally different from the vantage point of a Google Analytics, which is really about the content of the page, not the function of the application. Only New Relic is in millions of application instances with our code inside our customer's code. So that vantage point is incredibly valuable and powerful. We see the transaction go through the system. We're able to capture the most important information, like what was the dollar amount, what was the username, that kind of thing. The biggest pain with big data analytics is collecting the data. We're already there to collect the data. And then building a service to actually persist it all. We're really good at collecting an enormous amount of data. We're collecting 2.5 trillion events per month into our analytics database.
That sounds like a lot.
It's a lot. We query 1 billion events every 2 seconds. And the median query is 8 milliseconds. So there's a combination of just being able to collect the right data and process at an incredibly fast speeds that differentiates the solution. But your earlier question's a huge one.
When you say events, you're talking about like somebody's clicking on a website or they're buying something or they're abandoning a shopping cart.
Any time an HTTP transaction, an HTTP request goes through an application, that's an event that New Relic sees.
Okay.
And attached to that request could be all the parameters that make for interesting business questions.
Okay.
The most important thing I can do with New Relic is help New Relic become one of a handful of companies that created and succeeded on its second act. There are not many companies that have done it. You're right. That correlates also to most companies end up transitioning from being a innovation-centric, product-centric early-stage company and then bringing in the sales-oriented leadership to help grow that first idea. I've happened to be blessed with a remarkable senior team that's good at growing the business. We've got Chris Cook, who's an incredible president leading most of the operations on the product marketing side. Then Hillary was president of sales at Salesforce. That freed me up to spend most of my time last year building the next act. And when you build it and when not buying it, and when the CEO, like I literally just right now came straight down from a meeting where I'm working on analytics problems. And so it's top of mind for me. That increases our chance of success here. It's something I focus deeply on because I've got an incredible senior team that can focus on the execution of the APM business.
See, it's like we were talking last year about developer as king.
Yeah.
But when the CEO is the developer, I wonder if that makes things different. If now we can say, you know what, the CEO is fully invested. The dude hangs out, with his computer at lunch and tries to, come up with new approaches. Does that make a difference?
We hope so and believe so. So, I mean, just last Friday, I was running a query in Insights, and I wanted to answer a question that I couldn't in Insights. I wanted to see how much revenue we were getting from customers that were using a certain programming language.
Okay.
So I coded up the feature over the weekend, and I checked it in this morning. So that's, I know the business question. As a business person, I wanted that answer.
Yeah.
It was something I could see the solution to. But the point is, that sets an example inside the company that, we're not going to stop innovating and building, and we're going to be a scrappy startup even though we're 550 people.
Okay.
There are a lot of CEOs, I think, who once programmed, but there aren't that many that we talk to who are actually checking code in there on a daily or weekly basis, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it daily, but weekly I try to, and if only just for my, it brings, I'm less grumpy, and I think a leader that people like to be around more when I've just, got the joy of creating something in my recent history. So
now, you actually work this into your schedule, right? This is, sort of your personal schedule involves, you have little, I don't know, you call them sabbaticals or whatever, where you go off to your cabin and code?
Yeah, I try to schedule them up to a year in advance, because if you don't, with the demands of the job, your calendar will eat you alive. So every 6 weeks, I try to have a week set aside where I can go away with a clear calendar to create. I would say I don't bat 6 for 6 on a given year. I try to get, I probably get 4 of them done. So, and I don't want people to think that I'm the sole source of new ideas in the company or anything like that. In the company, like, you wouldn't believe the new products we're going to be announcing at FutureStack in a few weeks. That
I'll be there.
It's going to be a great conference, and like, I've just been up to our Portland office to see some of the demos that these guys have been and women have been building, and it's amazing stuff. So it's, again, it sets a cultural tone. If your CEO invests in it, then the company knows it's important.
Yeah, I think Zuckerberg probably, he's famously still writing some code for Facebook. He's probably not creating major features on Facebook anymore, but that does set an important.
Well, after we're $100 billion market cap, then maybe I'll write a little less code too. We got a ways to go.
One other thing, though, I wanted to hit on while we're together is data scientists. I remember you gave me the demo of Insights a few months ago in your office, and I was like, cool. You were able to pull up all this data, with just a few SQL queries.
Right.
But then I thought, you know what? All these companies are hiring data scientists, and I think you had, a certain position on data scientists. But I just want to ask, as a growing company that might have some extra money hanging around to employ one or two, if you have any, and what they're doing with all the data that they do have access to.
We're looking to increase our investment in data scientists. I think they have their role, certainly. When you collect, 2.5 trillion events per month off of all of our customers' applications, I think we can do a lot better job of anomaly detection or pattern detection, or perhaps something on the predictive side or machine learning. So those are all opportunities, and some domain expertise makes sense. But I think the other thing to talk about regarding data scientists is, if New Relic does its jobs right, you don't have to be a data scientist to answer a lot of the questions that only data scientists can answer today. Like the amount of work involved. If a CFO wants to know how many people who, signed up in this campaign last week didn't try out this feature, and how does that correlate to whether or not we had an increase in usage on, in this country? You can send off a data scientist for a week, and then they write a 4-hour batch job on Hadoop to get that answer, and hopefully New Relic can answer that question in a couple seconds. So then the data scientist can really focus on the high science and not the blocking and tackling of answering the questions that should be answered in great software like ours. Okay,
so you did basically acknowledge, though, that there are some things afoot. Now, what I'll just push a little more on is, are we going to see some of that at FutureStack? We're going to start to introduce some of that nuance.
It's further down the road.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that at FutureStack, what you're going to see is that the power of Insights is going to be far better understood, in that we don't know of another technology that's capable of crunching through this much data this quickly. That's so easy to use. And it's partially because we've built a supercluster in the cloud so our customers don't have to. Now, how do we make it so that we can solve more business problems, a broader set of business problems for different roles, and make it so that knowledge workers can also more easily use Insights and the power of Insights?
Let me ask you a question about the enterprise market in Silicon Valley more generally.
Yeah.
For the past couple of years, we've seen this transition, and you alluded to this at the beginning of our conversation, where enterprise software is sold, or services are sold, much more to end users now, and that design and ease of use is increasingly important. And that's leading to some significant kind of power shifts in the Valley in terms of who the big players are in enterprise. How far along in that curve are we?
It's still pretty early.
Okay.
Largely because Rome took a long time to kind of really finally go to irrelevance, after. So
No, wait, is Rome Oracle or IBM in this example?
Pick an incumbent that you have in your mind, and I won't speak to any in specific, but companies that don't have a culture of design excellence or ease of use, companies whose culture is, what do I need to do to get the CIO to sign this check today?
Okay, because I heard that the Emperor of Rome stepped aside for a couple of co-emperors recently.
Are you talking about Oracle?
No,
actually.
That's a separate topic, and it is interesting that in stepping aside, he did not let go of the engineers. So here's the most the longest tenure and arguably the most successful, unquestionably the most successful CEO in enterprise software says, I'm stepping aside as CEO, but I still need engineering. So I think there's something to be drawn there. But there are these companies that do billions of dollars in software, selling, a lot of it just on maintenance contracts of 12-year-old software that's a pain to use. And I don't think they're going to culturally change towards really knowing how to deliver software that delights the end customer. At New Relic, the person who sits closest to my office is the lead designer for the whole company. He's closer to my office than the president. The president's not too far away either, but that sets a point, sends a message in our company how important the ease of use and design of our software is. I don't think you'll find that at a company and this is not to bash SAP, but I bet you SAP's lead designer doesn't sit next the CEO.
Probably not.
So, yeah.
And, delight is not a word that I think they probably ever use. And it certainly wasn't being used 15 years ago in the halls of any enterprise companies, let alone ease of use. Well, they might have made a nod to it here and there.
It's possible that through acquisitions, they could get good designers who could sit not far away, but...
Yeah, but will they stay? If it's, if the best designers are at a company where design's really not valued as a core thing, then they'll probably wait out whatever lockup they have and find a company where their work is valued.
I guess the counter argument would be, I don't care about design if I got it's the numbers that I want, right?
Yeah.
I need the data. I need that to be accurate. I need it to
Yes, and it can't just be a yes. I don't want to be interpreted as the prettier the pixels, the more successfully your enterprise software business. Part of being a delight to use is it just works. Part of it is I don't have to read a huge manual just to get functional. I don't want to feel stupid in front of this software. Often, the whole imposter syndrome, right? You sit inside this arcane software and you're like, my goodness, am I really this dumb? It's like, no, the design of the software is that dumb. But that goes far beyond just how pretty is the screen.
Okay. Well, let me ask you about Silicon Valley in general.
Sure.
Bill Gurley was on record about a week ago in the Wall Street Journal talking about how the burn rate at many Silicon Valley companies is really high because they're raising a ton of money and they have to spend it, and valuations are pretty high. It's sort of, he didn't actually say that the bubble's about to burst or anything quite so dire, but it was sort of a cautionary note.
Yeah, it was.
Do you think, are you seeing signs that people are getting a little more nervous about how they're spending their
the question's
capital?
coming up, and Benchmark, Bill's a general partner of Benchmark, and Benchmark is our Series A investor. So my perspective on it is this. Companies absolutely need to think about the fundamentals of their business model at scale. And there are some companies that are so obsessed with just top-line growth and just think, you're going to be valued on multiple of revenue. But some companies are reminiscent of the companies that were chasing eyeballs in the internet bubble. Smart investors look past the surface and look at important things like gross margins. If you've got 80% gross margin, that's totally different from a company with 50% gross margins. And so if they have the same revenue and you're just doing multiple of revenue, you're missing a big part of the picture. You got to look at the cost to acquire a customer. Is that customer going to grow over time? And what's the lifetime value? These are just fundamentals, but basically that's what we look at New Relic, and we love, in combination of our market, we love how all those numbers line up. And so with that backdrop, we think it's absolutely the right thing to do to invest in growth. And we think we'll have a more successful profit engine in the long term for that. But it has to be all with a thoughtfully designed business model.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time. Do you want to give us just a sneak, something cool that's going to happen at FutureStack?
So just to set the stage, this is our second annual conference, and our first one sold out quite early last year. This one looks like it's well on its way to selling out too. The attendees universally loved the conference because the theme of the conference was changing the world through software. The fact that software engineers and developers and people who deliver software, they're delivering the work that's really changing the face of companies, right? It's as I say, it's no longer about automating back office things. It's about growing your business or doing things that your companies weren't even capable of doing before. Let's take, for example, the San Francisco 49ers. They are changing the way people watch modern football. Now, I wish they could change how they're handling, the second half and
the way they play football.
Illegal hands to the face. But what they're doing is the new stadium is entirely driven by this incredible mobile technology where you can pre-order your food from your seat. You can actually have your food taken to your seat. All you need to bring in the stadium is your phone. And as long as you don't run out of battery, you're going to be fine. You don't need and of course you can look at the most recent play and everything. All that software is differentiating the 49ers viewing experience. It's all managed by New Relic. But the person who's at the head of that venue next, and they're going to roll it out to other professional sports teams, they're changing the face of modern sports through software. And that's going to be the type of speaker you're going to see at FutureStack, which I think is a unique thing for a tech conference.
All right. Well, we'll be there. Jordan will be covering it.
Yep.
I may swing by as well. Lou Cerny, thank you very much for taking the time to join us on What to Think.
I loved it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining us for our weekly technology news podcast. For more tech news from VentureBeat, you can go to VentureBeat.com. And if you haven't subscribed to our podcast in iTunes yet, please do so. Just search for What to Think on iTunes. Until next week, I'm Dylan Tweeney.
I'm Jordan Ovett.
Catch you later.